From the moment she was old enough to understand the world around her, Sophia knew that she was different not because of anything she had done, but because of how her mother treated her compared to her older sister, Mary. For as long as she could remember, her mother had adored Mary, showering her with attention, praise, and the best of everything. Sophia, on the other hand, was the daughter who never seemed to measure up. Their mother, once a local beauty queen, took great pride in Mary, who inherited her look's bright eyes, delicate features, and an effortless grace that people often complimented. Whenever someone recognized Mary as Patricia's daughter, their mother would beam with pride. But for Sophia, who resembled their father with her darker eyes and simpler features, there was only disappointment in their mother's gaze. The differences between them were evident in every aspect of their lives. Christmas mornings were a painful reminder of her place in the family. One year, Mary unwrapped a beautifully packaged designer dress, something their mother had clearly chosen with care and excitement. "It's perfect for Mary," she had said with pride. When it was Sophia's turn, she unwrapped a box containing plain jeans and a t-shirt, likely bought on sale at a department store. "These suit you better, Sophia," their mother said casually, as if her words didn't cut deep. It was as if she had already decided that Sophia was undeserving of anything special. Even at mealtimes, the favoritism was undeniable. Mary would always receive generous portions, with their mother encouraging her to eat more, often offering homemade desserts with a smile. But when it came to Sophia, the tone was different. "That should be enough if you want to keep that figure, don't you think?" her mother would say dismissively, placing a noticeably smaller portion on her plate. The implication was clear. While Mary was indulged, Sophia had to be restrained, as if she were somehow less worthy of being cared for. As they grew older, the gap between them widened. Mary became popular in school, excelling as the captain of the cheerleading squad, while their mother proudly attended every weekend game, taking countless pictures of her perfect daughter. Sophia, on the other hand, found solace in the track team, where she excelled at running. But no matter how many races she won, her mother never came to watch. "I'm busy," she would say, brushing off Sophia's quiet hope for acknowledgement. Their father sometimes attended her competitions, offering a gentle pat on the head and words of encouragement, but he was too caught up in work to truly see what was happening at home. It wasn't until high school that Sophia began to realize how abnormal her situation was. One day, her best friend Serena confronted her. "Sophia, your mother is way too cruel," she said. At first, Sophia was shocked. To her, this was just how things had always been. But Serena continued, "She buys expensive clothes for Mary, but for you. My mother would never treat me differently from my sister." It was in that moment that Sophia understood her mother's behavior wasn't normal. It wasn't just favoritism, it was rejection. Yet, despite the pain, Sophia refused to let it break her. Instead, she silently vowed that one day, she would build a life where she was valued. And when that day came, she would never, ever repeat her mother's mistakes. For years, Sophia lived under the shadow of her mother's rejection, enduring the constant comparison to her older sister, Mary. While Mary basked in their mother's love, Sophia was left to navigate childhood feeling like an outsider in her own family. But rather than allowing this unfair treatment to define her, she made a decision: she would leave and build a life of her own. The moment she graduated from high school, Sophia packed her bags and left home. She knew there was no future for her in that house, and she was determined to escape the suffocating grip of her mother's disapproval. "You'll be back soon enough," her mother sneered as she walked out the door, as if Sophia was bound to fail. But Sophia refused to believe that. She had no intention of returning. The first few months were the hardest. With no financial support from her family, since their mother had spent all the college savings on Mary's tuition, Sophia had to rely solely on herself. She took up a job as a waitress at a local diner, working long shifts to afford rent and basic necessities. The hours were grueling, and there were nights when exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy blanket. But every time she thought about giving up, she reminded herself, I am not going back. Determined to build a stable future, she started applying for clerical positions in major supermarket chains and small offices. But there was one problem: her high school diploma. Every time she mentioned it in an interview, she could see the interviewer's expression change. She was rejected over 30 times before she finally got a chance. Her turning point came when she applied for a customer service role at an IT company. Unlike the others, the HR manager looked at her resume and said, "We value your experience and determination more than your education." It was the first time someone recognized her effort rather than just her background. And just like that, Sophia landed her first office job. It was in that company that she met Warner, a systems engineer. Their first interaction was over a simple office issue. Sophia was struggling with a jammed printer, and Warner came to her rescue. "You're always here early and leaving late," he remarked one day, noticing her dedication. Sophia smiled and replied honestly, "For someone with just a high school diploma, this job is a precious opportunity." That was the beginning of something special. Over time, their casual conversations over coffee turned into weekend meetups, and soon, they were inseparable. As their relationship deepened, Sophia opened up about her past: the favoritism, the rejection, the struggle to break free. She feared that Warner would see her differently after knowing the truth. But instead, he held her close and said, "No one has the right to deny your worth." For the first time, Sophia felt truly safe. 2 years into her job, during the winter season, Warner proposed. Under the soft glow of Christmas lights, he knelt before her and simply asked, "Will you marry me?" Without hesitation, she said yes. Sophia had spent years fighting for her own place in the world. Now, she was no longer alone. She had built a new life, a life where she was truly valued. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt like she truly belonged somewhere. She had built a new life with Warner, a man who loved her for who she was, not for who she was supposed to be. She had a stable job, a warm and supportive family through her in-laws, and, most importantly, she had freedom from the oppressive shadow of her mother's expectations. Then, one day, everything changed. Sophia discovered she was pregnant. The moment she saw the 2 pink lines on the test, her hands trembled with a mix of emotions: joy, excitement, and fear. She and Warner had talked about starting a family one day, but now that it was real, she felt overwhelmed. When she told Warner, he lit up with happiness, lifting her off the ground in excitement. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, already making plans to share the news with his parents. Warner's parents were thrilled. They embraced Sophia, showering her with love, bringing her baby catalogs, and reassuring her that they would support her every step of the way. It was a warmth she had never known from her own mother. But despite the happiness surrounding her, a small voice inside her whispered, "Should I tell my family?" Sophia had spent years keeping her distance from her mother. Though their relationship had remained strained, she still held on to a sliver of hope that the news of her pregnancy might change something. Maybe, just maybe, becoming a grandmother would soften her mother's heart. Perhaps, this baby could mend the years of hurt and bridge the gap that had always existed between them. So, against Warner's better judgment, Sophia decided to visit her parents' house and share the news. They contacted Mary beforehand, asking her to be there as well. Mary, always warm and cheerful, was delighted. "It's been so long. I can't wait to see you," she said over the phone. Her father was at work but would return later in the evening. When they arrived, Mary greeted them with a bright smile, but their mother's face was tense the moment she laid eyes on Sophia. However, as soon as she noticed Warner, She quickly put on a fake smile. "Oh my, I wasn't expecting visitors. Let me get something for you." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a plate of homemade cookies, all sugar-laden sweets. Sophia frowned internally. Her mother knew she disliked sweets yet had deliberately made them anyway. But when Warner reached for one, their mother smiled at him sweetly. "Oh, that's right, Sophia doesn't like sweets, does she?" "I'm sorry." Sophia ignored the jab. This visit had a purpose. Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke. "Mom, we came here today because we have something important to tell you." For a moment, her mother's eyes flashed sharply. "Actually, I'm pregnant." A heavy silence fell over the room. Mary was the first to react. Her face lit up, and she rushed over. "Sophia, congratulations." "That's amazing news," she beamed, hugging her sister. But their mother's expression grew darker. Her forced smile vanished, replaced by something far colder. Warner stood up to take a work call, and Mary stepped into the kitchen to prepare tea. The moment Sophia was alone with her mother, the air turned ice cold. "Why did it have to be you first?" Her mother's voice trembled with suppressed anger. Sophia's breath hitched. Before she could respond, her mother continued, "The first grandchild should have been Mary's. Someone like you doesn't deserve this." Sophia stared at her in shock. Even now, she wasn't enough. Even carrying the family's first grandchild, she was still a disappointment. But before she could fully process the pain of those words, her mother did something unthinkable. She suddenly stood up and kicked Sophia hard in the stomach. A sharp, searing pain exploded through her body. Sophia collapsed to the floor, clutching her abdomen as a scream tore from her lips. "Mom, stop." Mary's horrified voice rang out as she ran into the room, witnessing everything. At that moment, Sophia realized there was no hope for reconciliation. Her mother would never change. The sharp pain in Sophia's stomach spread like fire through her body as she lay curled on the floor, gasping for breath. Her own mother had kicked her, had attacked her knowing she was pregnant. The reality of what had just happened was too overwhelming to fully comprehend, but the pain was undeniable, radiating from her abdomen in excruciating waves. "Mom, stop." Her sister, Mary, rushed into the room, her face pale with shock and horror. Behind her, Warner came sprinting in, having just returned from his phone call. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw Sophia on the ground, tears streaming down her face, her arms protectively wrapped around her stomach. Mary immediately pulled out her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance," she declared, her hands shaking as she dialed. Warner dropped to his knees beside Sophia, his face contorted with worry as he gently touched her back. "Sophia, stay with me. Just breathe." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Their mother, however, stood unmoved, her expression cold and indifferent. "Why are you making such a fuss?" she scoffed. "She just bumped into the dresser herself." Sophia's stomach churned not just from the pain, but from the sheer audacity of her mother's lie. Even now, after what she had done, she refused to take responsibility. But this time, Mary didn't stay silent. She spun around, eyes blazing. "Stop lying. I saw you. You kicked Sophia in the stomach on purpose. How could you do that to your own daughter?" Their mother's face twitched, but she didn't respond. Instead, she just crossed her arms, as if she was the victim in all of this. Sophia fought to stay conscious as the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Everything felt distant and surreal. The room blurred at the edges, the voices around her becoming echoes. She could feel Warner's hand gripping hers tightly, grounding her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed the situation. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," one of them said, motioning for a stretcher. Mary went with Sophia in the ambulance, refusing to leave her side. She held her sister's hand tightly, her eyes filled with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Sophia. I should have noticed sooner. I should have protected you." Despite the pain, Sophia managed to squeeze her sister's hand weakly. "It's not your fault." As the ambulance weaved through the streets, Sophia's mind drifted back to her past, to every moment of rejection, neglect, and cruelty she had endured at the hands of her mother. But this was the final straw. She had spent years hoping for even the smallest sign of love from her mother. She had excused the favoritism, endured the pain, convinced herself that maybe, someday, things would change. But now, as she lay on a hospital stretcher, her baby's fate uncertain, she realized the truth: her mother had never loved her. And she never would. By the time they arrived at the hospital, Sophia had made a decision. She would never let this woman hurt her again. Sophia lay in the hospital bed, her body still aching from the attack, but the pain in her heart was far worse. She had always known her mother didn't love her, but she never imagined that hatred would escalate to violence, especially when she was carrying a child. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor echoed in the silent room as she gently placed a hand on her belly, silently praying that her baby would be safe. The doctor finally entered with the results, his expression calm but serious. "There's a small fracture in the bone, but thankfully, the baby is unharmed." The weight of those words released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. Her child was safe. Mary squeezed her hand tightly, while Warner exhaled deeply, nodding in gratitude. "Thank God," he whispered. But the relief was short-lived. The door swung open, and their father stepped inside, his face pale with distress. He had come straight from work after Mary called him, and the tension in the air was suffocating. Behind him stood their mother. Sophia's body tensed immediately. Even now, after everything, her mother's face remained unreadable, as if she had done nothing wrong. Her father spoke first. "Mary called us." "Is it true?" His voice trembled, as though he was afraid of the answer. Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, their mother interjected. "Oh, what are you talking about?" she said with exaggerated innocence. Sophia just bumped into the dresser herself. Mary shot up from her seat, eyes blazing. "That's enough," she snapped, her voice filled with rage. "I saw everything, Mom. You kicked Sophia in the stomach. Why are you still lying?" Their father's face drained of color. He turned to their mother, his hands shaking. "Tell me that's not true." But their mother said nothing. Instead, the room was filled with an unexpected voice. "May I speak with you?" Everyone turned to see a hospital social worker standing at the door. She was calm, but her gaze was sharp, filled with quiet determination. Their mother's face finally showed a reaction, a flicker of unease. The social worker stepped forward. "This is clearly a case of domestic violence. Given that the victim is pregnant, it will be treated as a more serious offense." Silence. Their mother's expression hardened. And then, she did what she always did: she played the victim. "I'm being ganged up on. I'm the villain now? After everything I've done for this family," she wailed, as if she were the one suffering. But no one in the room was fooled. The social worker remained unmoved. "We can report this to the police." Sophia took a deep breath. She had been silent for far too long. I want to tell the truth, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the pain. Her father turned to look at her, his eyes filled with something she had never seen before: guilt. Dad, she began, her voice trembling. I've been enduring this for years. And so, for the first time, Sophia spoke openly about everything. She told them about the favoritism, the neglect, the cruel words. About how, when no one else was around, her mother's mask would drop, revealing the true extent of her cruelty. About the years of rejection, the pain of being treated like an outsider in her own home. Her father's hands balled into fists. His expression was one of deep regret. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Sophia wiped her tears. Because no one would have believed me. Mary covered her face, sobbing. I didn't see it. I should have noticed, Sophia. I should have protected you. Then, their mother snapped. Her voice rose into a shriek. Is it my fault? It's because she was ugly and useless. Mary was beautiful and talented like me. She was the daughter I deserved. The entire room went silent. For the first time in her life, Sophia saw her father's kind, quiet demeanor crack. He turned to his wife, his voice low but filled with fury. You are unfit to be a mother. The weight of those words hit like a storm. I won't let you hurt Sophia anymore. The social worker calmly spoke again. Given the circumstances, I recommend applying for a restraining order. Counseling may also be necessary. Their mother's eyes widened in shock. Then, she lunged toward Sophia's bed, her face twisted in rage. You ungrateful child, she screamed. After everything I've done for you. But before she could reach Sophia, Warner and their father quickly restrained her. Nurses rushed in as the room erupted into chaos. That evening, their father made his decision. I want a divorce. His voice was firm, unwavering. Sophia's mother stood frozen, disbelief washing over her face. But it was too late. The past 25 years of pain had led to this moment, and her control over Sophia was finally broken. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt free. The woman who had tormented her for 25 years was finally out of her life. After her father's decision to divorce her mother and the restraining order issued against her, Sophia could finally breathe. But even though her mother was gone, the scars she left behind would take time to heal. Still, there was one thing that mattered above all else: her baby was safe. Throughout her stay in the hospital, Mary never left her side. Every day, she brought warm meals, books, and fresh flowers, filling the room with warmth that their mother had never given. She stayed up late, talking to Sophia, reassuring her that things would be different now. I won't let you go through this alone, Mary whispered one night. I'll always be here for you and the baby. Their father also visited frequently. The guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. He had failed to see what was happening all these years. But now, he was determined to make amends. Sophia, I should have protected you. I should have seen the truth sooner. His voice wavered, but his hands were steady as he held hers. For the first time, she felt like she truly had a father. Meanwhile, Warner's parents also played a huge role in supporting her recovery. They visited almost every day, bringing homemade soups and warm blankets, treating Sophia as if she were their own daughter. You're part of our family, Sophia, her mother-in-law said one afternoon, gently placing a hand on her belly. And this little one? She's going to be so loved. Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Despite everything she had been through, She had gained something more powerful than the pain of her past real family. On the day of her discharge, Sophia was greeted with the sight of Warner, Mary, and their father standing together. They had all come to take her home. As she was wheeled out of the hospital, the soft spring sunlight bathed the world in warmth. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, signaling the arrival of a new season, one free from the darkness of her past. Before getting into the car, her father suddenly stopped and turned to her. With a serious expression, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "From now on, let's live as a real family." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. It was something she had wanted to hear her entire life. She nodded, her heart finally at peace. The months passed quickly. Sophia's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and soon, the day of Nikki's birth arrived. After 16 hours of labor, Sophia heard the sound she had been waiting for, her baby's first cry. "It's a girl," the doctor announced with a smile. "She's healthy and strong." As the nurse placed the tiny newborn into Sophia's arms, tears streamed down her face. Her daughter's tiny hands clenched into fists, her eyes squeezed shut. She was perfect. "Nikki," Sophia whispered softly, calling her by the name she and Warner had chosen. Warner, Mary, and their father were all in the waiting room. The moment they saw Nikki, their faces lit up with joy. Her father, eyes glistening with emotion, held his granddaughter carefully in his arms. "She looks just like you did when you were born," he murmured, his voice thick with love. Mary leaned over, wiping her eyes. "She has your eyes, Sophia." It was true, Nikki had Sophia's deep brown eyes, but her soft smile was exactly like Warner's. As Sophia watched the people around her, she realized something important. She had spent her entire life yearning for her mother's love, but in the end, she had found love elsewhere. This was her family. And no one, not even her mother, could take this happiness away. 3 months had passed since Nikki's birth, and every day felt like a new beginning for Sophia. She had waited her entire life to feel the warmth of a real family, and now, she was surrounded by people who truly loved her. Her days were filled with the joys and challenges of motherhood. Some nights, she barely got any sleep, rocking Nikki in her arms as the baby cried endlessly, while Warner whispered words of encouragement by her side. Other days, she found herself watching Nikki sleep peacefully, her tiny fingers curled around Sophia's hand, as if reassuring her that everything was going to be okay. Despite the exhaustion, Sophia had never felt more fulfilled. Mary had moved into an apartment nearby and visited almost daily, always ready to help with Nikki. "I missed so much of your life before, but I won't miss a single moment now," she promised, holding Nikki with a smile. Their father had retired early, saying he wanted to spend more time with his granddaughter. Every weekend, he would visit, cradling Nikki for hours. "You've done so well, Sophia," he told her one day, his voice filled with emotion. "You've become a wonderful mother." Those words of approval she had longed to hear her entire life brought tears to her eyes. Warner's parents were equally devoted. Sophia's mother-in-law knitted tiny sweaters and hats for Nikki, while her father-in-law constantly took pictures, capturing every milestone. They treated Sophia as if she had always been their daughter. Beyond her family, Sophia had also found a community of support. She began attending a support group for women who had experienced toxic family relationships, where she could share her story and listen to others who had walked similar paths. She was not alone. The last time she had heard from her mother was a voicemail message filled with bitterness. "I'll never forgive you. You made me lose everything." After that, she moved to another state, and Sophia knew she would likely never see her again. And yet, when she thought of her mother, it was no longer with anger or hatred. She was simply a woman who had lost her way, incapable of love. But Sophia? She had love in abundance. On Nikki's 6-month celebration, the house was filled with laughter, warmth, and family. Warner leaned in, whispering, "Are you happy?" Sophia looked around at her sister, her father, her in-laws, and the baby in her arms. She smiled. "Yes, I am." For the first time in her life, Sophia had everything she had ever wanted.